My name is John Carter. I am 34 and I died for 7 minutes on July 14th, 2023. I still could not believe it. The air was thick with the smell of dust, the sounds of hooves beating against the earth, and the wind rushing past my ears. I had been riding, feeling free, feeling alive. I thought nothing could go wrong. Then, in an instant, everything shattered. A horse I was riding suddenly reared up, its body twisting, its legs flailing. I was thrown into the air, spinning. Time slowed, and for a moment I could almost feel the ground beneath me. As I descended, I braced for impact. The moment I hit the ground, it was as if the world went silent. The force of the fall knocked the breath from my lungs. But something was worse than the pain. I couldn't breathe. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I could hear the sound of my heartbeat, slow, weak, and then nothing. Just silence. It was as if I was floating, suspended in a place where nothing made sense. I opened my eyes. My vision was blurry. The world around me was distorted. And then, I saw it. The paramedics had arrived, their hands frantically working over me. I could see their faces, the terror in their eyes as they pumped my chest. Their voices shouted orders. Their words were blurred by the growing hum in my ears. Machines were beeping, an alarming noise filling the air. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. I looked down at my own body. My chest was rising and falling, but it felt like I wasn't there. My soul was elsewhere. I was floating above my own body. I saw the paramedics working frantically, the defibrillator paddles pressed against my chest. I watched as the electric shock surged through me. I could see everything, but I couldn't feel anything. The lights above me flickered as I drifted farther from my body. It was like I was watching a scene from a movie, unable to reach out, unable to scream. I heard my family's voices now, faint, distant cries of panic. My wife's voice, trembling as she called my name. My mother, in tears, begging for God's mercy. But none of it felt real. It was as if I were watching someone else's life, not my own. I kept thinking, I've done everything right. I'm active in church. I lead Bible studies. I serve in the choir. I do all the right things. I'm good. I'm righteous. But as I drifted farther away, I began to wonder, was I really? I thought I had lived right, but what came next proved I was wrong. I always thought I was doing everything right. I was active in church, leading the choir, teaching Bible study, volunteering with the youth ministry. Everyone saw me as the model Christian. But now, floating above my own body, hearing the frantic voices of my family and the harsh beeping of the machines, I began to wonder, was it enough? My life had always been about appearances. I tried to live a good life, one that would make others proud, one that would bring me closer to God. But deep inside, there were things I never spoke about, things I hid, things I didn't even want to admit to myself. I had this constant nagging feeling, like I wasn't truly living the life I portrayed. I had long since learned how to wear a mask. Everyone around me saw a man who had it all together. But beneath the surface, I was falling apart. I felt like I was juggling my faith and my flaws, afraid that if anyone saw behind the mask, they would judge me for not being perfect. In 2022, I had a falling out with my best friend Matt. It started as a disagreement over something trivial, a misunderstanding that snowballed. He said something about me, something that stung, and instead of talking it through, I let the resentment build up inside of me. He reached out a few times, but I ignored him, refusing to forgive. I told myself, I'm the better person here. I don't need to be the one to apologize. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. My pride kept me from reaching out. I told myself that I wasn't the one at fault, but deep down I felt this anger growing, eating away at me. I couldn't let go of it. Even though I prayed for peace, it never came. I lied to myself and everyone around me, thinking that harboring that resentment didn't matter as long as I was doing all the right things in church. And then there was my addiction, the one I never spoke of, pornography. I had been struggling with it for years, but no one knew. Not my wife, not anyone in the church. It was my secret. I kept telling myself that it wasn't that big of a deal. After all, I was still serving in church. I was still leading Bible study. I justified it by thinking, at least I'm not hurting anyone. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was hiding a part of myself that I couldn't control, and it was slowly consuming me. I couldn't break free from it. Every time I thought I was free, it came back stronger, pulling me deeper into shame. But I kept pretending it wasn't a problem, because who would believe a leader in the church could be struggling with something like that? In 2021, there was something else. I had been gossiping about some of the church leadership behind their backs. It was wrong, but in those moments, I justified it, telling myself it wasn't anything serious. Everyone does it, right? But it didn't take long before I realized the damage I had caused. The division, the hurt, the distrust. And yet I didn't stop. I kept up the facade, pretending everything was fine, pretending that my words didn't matter. I told myself that I wasn't the only one doing it, so surely it didn't count. There was a part of me that knew all of this was wrong, but I kept convincing myself that I was good enough, that my good deeds, my church activities, would somehow cover up my hidden struggles. I believed I could deceive myself into thinking that God would overlook my flaws because I was doing His work on the surface. But the truth was, deep down, I knew I wasn't fooling anyone. Not God, not my family, and certainly not myself. The guilt would hit me at night, when I was alone, when the distractions of the day faded away, and I had no one to blame but myself. Midway through this, I had to ask myself, is outward religion enough if the heart is cold? My heart ached, as I thought of all the lies I had lived, the mask I wore for everyone else, while my soul withered on the inside. I couldn't escape the fact that I had been so focused on my image, and on what others thought of me, that I had neglected the very thing that mattered most, my relationship with God. I wasn't living in truth. I could feel the weight of my sins, as if they were pulling me farther and farther from the life I thought I had lived. My hypocrisy, my secret sins, they were becoming too heavy to ignore. The longer I stayed suspended in this in-between place, the more I realized I couldn't run from them anymore. As I watched everything happening from above, I couldn't imagine how small my sins looked where I was going. I had lived a life of pride, pretending to be righteous, but I was far from it. I had convinced myself that I was doing enough good to balance the wrongs. But in that moment, I saw the truth. There was no way to hide anymore. There was no way to pretend. I felt so lost in my own hypocrisy, in my own lies. I thought I had lived right, but the truth was now painfully clear. This was not the life I had imagined. This was not the life I had led, and I had no idea where I was heading next. Have you ever asked yourself the same question? Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. And as I felt the weightlessness before anything else, the sudden quiet, the kind that swallowed everything, all the noises, the beeping machines, the voices of my family, disappeared. In that silence, I was both present and absent. I couldn't describe it any other way. I was no longer tethered to my body. The sensation of floating was overwhelming. It felt like I was being pulled, but I wasn't sure where to. A pull from deep within, a force that gently urged me forward. There was no sound, but there was light, faint but growing. It wasn't the kind of light you see with your eyes. It was something far more profound, an inner light that tugged at the very core of who I was. I drifted until I began to see. The light slowly morphed into something far more brilliant, yet distant. It felt like a threshold was waiting for me, like a door heavy but welcoming. I could feel it, like a presence waiting just beyond. The weight of every hidden sin, the resentment, the addiction, the gossip, felt as if they were pulling me downward, toward a place I couldn't quite see, but knew all too well. It wasn't just a physical sensation, it was spiritual, a burden I had carried without truly acknowledging it. I had thought I was doing good. I had spent years in church teaching, singing, leading. I convinced myself that I was living the right life, doing what was expected of me, helping others. But now, suspended between two worlds, I saw things differently. All the good works, all the outward acts of kindness, they seemed so shallow, a facade, something to cover up the truth of who I really was. I could feel the weight of my sins, as if they were pulling me farther and farther from the life I thought I had lived. My hypocrisy, my secret sins, they were becoming too heavy to ignore. The longer I stayed suspended in this in-between place, the more I realized I couldn't run from them anymore. Every flash of memory, every moment I had buried deep, came flooding back. The anger I held against Matt, my best friend, I could see it now, how I had allowed a simple misunderstanding to fester into something far more toxic. The resentment I had towards him, my pride in never reaching out, convinced that I was in the right. I watched it all like a silent film, seeing every moment where I had turned my back on reconciliation. And then there was my addiction, the secret part of me that no one knew about. I saw it each night I had spent in shame, feeding my habit, lying to myself, and to everyone around me. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time. Everyone does it, I told myself. But now in this space, I saw the truth, how it had eaten away at my marriage, at my soul, the loneliness it had created, the shame that clung to me like a shadow. I had lived in denial, telling myself it didn't matter, but in this place it mattered more than anything. Then came the gossiping, the conversations I had with people, tearing down the leadership of my church, questioning their motives, whispering in corners. I saw the faces of those I had hurt, their trust, their faith in me, shattered by my words. And the damage didn't stop there. The division I had caused, the seeds of doubt I had planted in the hearts of others. It was all so clear now. I thought I could hide these things. I thought I could mask them with good deeds and church activities. But now, with nothing left to shield me, I saw the full extent of my actions. The mask I wore so proudly was now a heavy burden that weighed me down, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I couldn't escape it. Everywhere I looked, it was there, my sins, my failures. I had tried to justify them, telling myself that I was still a good person, that I was still worthy of grace. But now, with each passing second, I felt smaller, more exposed. The weight of my sins was suffocating me. And then I saw something that terrified me even more: other souls. People I didn't recognize, but their pain was unmistakable. I saw them trapped in darkness, separated from the light I was floating toward. They were in torment, not physically but emotionally, suffering from the same pride, the same hypocrisy, the same secret sins that had plagued my own heart. Some of them were crying out in anguish, others simply stood frozen in their own despair, like they had given up. I couldn't bear the sight of it. It was as if I could feel their suffering, their regrets, their lost hope. It wasn't just their pain I saw, it was the reflection of my own. I felt a rising panic. I had always believed I was safe, that my righteousness was enough, that serving in church, being involved in ministry, and living a good life would cover up the things I never let anyone see. But now, in the silence of this place, I realized how wrong I had been. And then the fear hit me. I thought I was prepared. I thought I had done enough. But the truth began to sink in. I wasn't prepared. I was lost. The weight of my sin, my hypocrisy, had carried me to the edge of something I feared more than death itself: eternal separation. Was this it? Was this where I was going? I felt a coldness creeping in. The abyss seemed to be swallowing me whole. The thought of it was overwhelming. There was nothing left to hold on to. No escape, no second chance. But then something happened. There was a flicker, a tiny flicker of light, like a distant star. A presence I couldn't see, but I felt it. It was gentle, like a whisper in the darkness. A pull not of fear, but of love. I couldn't explain it, but it felt like a lifeline being cast toward me. It was the softest thing I had ever felt, yet it pierced through my terror, through the weight of my shame. It was something impossibly gentle, something that touched the hollow center of my fear. Then it happened. Then something impossibly gentle touched the hollow center of my fear. I felt the gentle touch again, the one that had pierced through my fear. It wasn't like any touch I had ever known. It was full of peace, full of warmth, like everything that had been broken inside me was being mended in an instant. I felt the weight of my sins begin to lift, but only for a moment. I still wasn't sure what was happening, but I knew it wasn't over. I opened my eyes, or at least I think I did. Everything around me was bathed in light, not the bright, harsh light that you would expect in a hospital room or a place of judgment, but a soft, radiant glow that seemed to emanate from everywhere. It was comforting, yet terrifying all at once. It felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't understand, something too pure for me to fully comprehend. And then I saw him, Jesus. He wasn't like I had imagined him in church, no bright shining robes or a grand crown. He stood before me simply, yet his presence was so powerful it seemed to fill the space. He was calm, yet there was a strength to him, a conviction that made me feel small, like I had nothing to hide anymore. I didn't know how to react. I felt an overwhelming sense of both awe and shame. I had lived my life pretending to be someone I wasn't. Here in his presence I was exposed. Everything I had hidden, every moment of hypocrisy, every sin I had buried deep inside me was laid bare before him. I couldn't hide from it. I couldn't run from it. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought I would break apart under the weight of his gaze. There was no condemnation in his eyes, no anger, just sorrow. A sorrow that made me want to collapse in his presence, to confess everything, to beg for mercy. And then he spoke, softly, but with authority that seemed to resonate through my entire being. You thought you lived right, he said. You thought your good works would be enough to hide the darkness inside. But what I see in you, John, is not righteousness. It is a mask that covers the true state of your heart. The words cut deeper than I could have imagined. I had always believed I was doing enough, that my efforts to be a good Christian would outweigh my flaws. I had convinced myself that being involved in church, leading Bible studies, and serving in the choir was enough. But now, in his presence, I saw the truth. He didn't stop there. You harbored resentment against your friend Matt. I saw a vision of Matt, of how I had refused to reconcile with him, how I had chosen pride over forgiveness, the bitterness I had held on to for so long, the way it had poisoned our friendship. I could see Matt's face, his confusion and hurt. I had justified it all, telling myself I was in the right, that he should have come to me first. But in that moment, I saw the destruction my pride had caused, the bridge that had been burned between us. Jesus' voice was gentle but piercing. Resentment is like a poison, he continued. It eats at the soul, making you blind to the love and forgiveness you are called to show. Then he spoke of my addiction, the secret part of me I had hidden away for so long, the addiction to pornography that I had kept hidden from everyone. This sin, John, he said, his eyes full of sorrow, is not just a private struggle. It affects everything, the way you see yourself, the way you see others, and the way you treat the people you love. It eats at the very foundation of your relationship with me. I wanted to shrink away, to hide from him, but there was no escape. Every word he spoke cut through me like a sword, exposing the truth I had buried deep in my heart. I had thought I was in control, but the reality was that I was drowning in shame, in secret sin that I had convinced myself was harmless. But he wasn't done yet. He showed me a vision of the gossip I had spread about the church leadership. I saw the faces of the pastors and leaders I had whispered about, the damage I had caused, the seeds of division I had planted in the church, making people question their leaders, creating distrust among brothers and sisters. In that moment, I realized just how far my words had gone. how the things I had said in private had caused lasting harm to the very body of Christ I was meant to build up. Your words have power, John, he said, his voice filled with grief. And when you use them to tear down others, you tear down the kingdom of God. What you have done in the dark will be brought into the light. I was speechless. All the excuses, all the justifications I had made for my actions crumbled away in his presence. There was no hiding from the truth anymore. I had been a hypocrite, pretending to be something I wasn't, living a double life. And then, as if to soften the blow, he gently placed his hand on my shoulder. I felt his love, his forgiveness, pouring into me like a river, washing away the years of pride, the years of self-deception. It wasn't the end of my reckoning, but it was the beginning of my redemption. He wasn't angry with me. He wasn't condemning me. He was calling me to something better, something real. He spoke again, this time with a conviction that shook me to my core. You will go back, he said, but you must go back with a different heart, a heart that is truly mine, a heart that knows the weight of sin and the power of forgiveness. The force of his words hit me like a wave, and I understood what he meant. He wasn't just giving me a second chance, he was giving me a new purpose, to go back, not to continue living as I had before, but to embrace the truth of who I really was and what I needed to change, to live a life of authenticity, of repentance, and of reconciliation. And with those words, everything changed. You will go back, he said, and I felt everything change. The next thing I felt was a sharp jolt, like someone had plugged me back into my own body. My heart thudded erratically in my chest, the monitor beside me spiking wildly. The beeping of the machines became deafening. The panic in the voices of the doctors, their frantic movements, it all felt too real, too immediate. Pulse, he's got a pulse. I heard someone shout. For a moment I couldn't process what was happening. My eyes fluttered open, my vision blurry, my mind struggling to catch up. But the pain in my chest reminded me that I was alive. I wasn't dead, I was back. And as I came to, I saw them, my family, gathered around me, their faces filled with disbelief and relief. My wife, tears streaming down her face, holding my hand. My mother, her lips moving in silent prayer. They had thought they lost me, but here I was, breathing again, coming back to life, after 7 minutes in another world. I could feel the weight of everything I had seen and heard still pressing down on me. The warmth, the forgiveness, the love Jesus had shown me, it wasn't something I could easily forget, but it was more than just a moment. It was a calling to live differently, to go back and make things right. I took a deep breath, the oxygen in my lungs, grounding me in the reality of my return. But my heart was no longer the same. I knew now, with every part of me, that I couldn't go back to who I had been. I couldn't continue hiding behind the mask I had worn for so long. The first thing I did was reach out to Matt. It wasn't easy, but I called him. I confessed my pride, my refusal to reconcile. I admitted that I had wronged him, and I asked for his forgiveness. The conversation was tense, but in the end, he forgave me. Our friendship was healing, slowly but surely. Next, I turned to my wife. I couldn't hide from her any longer. I told her everything, the addiction I had kept secret, the shame I had carried in silence. I begged for her forgiveness. It wasn't easy for her to hear, but she listened, and we began to rebuild trust, brick by brick. She agreed to stand by me as I sought counseling and accountability. But it wasn't just the relationships with those closest to me that needed healing. I knew I had to take responsibility for my actions in the church, the gossip, the division I had caused. It was all too much to ignore. I called the church leadership and asked to meet with them. I apologized for the damage I had done, for the words I had said in private, for the distrust I had sown. It was humbling, but it was necessary. As I walked away from that meeting, I realized something profound. True transformation wasn't just about asking for forgiveness, it was about showing it through my actions. It was about living authentically, without the mask, without hiding behind the lies. It was about being honest with myself and with others. If your heart stopped tonight, where would you go? Think about that, and share this with the one who needs it most. This was my second chance, but it was not the end of the story. My name is John Carter, and this is my own testimony. I have lived through the pain of hiding, the weight of sin, and the freedom that comes with repentance. I hope that sharing this story will reach someone who feels lost, someone who may be hiding their struggles, someone who needs to hear this message. Please share this with others. Let them know that no matter where they've been, no matter how far they feel from grace, there is always a chance for transformation. There is always hope. You never know who might need to hear this today.